During the show, we've spoken about schools, care homes, businesses, all of them pretty heavily affected by the coronavirus lockdown. Last Sunday, the Prime Minister laid out a roadmap for easing that lockdown. But everybody is going to be watching closely to see what happens to infections as measures are relaxed. To discuss all of this and more, we can head to central London, where we'll be joined by the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Michael Gove. Mr Gove, very good to see you this morning. I wonder if we might start with the schools, the school system. And there will be parents up and down the country at the moment struggling with this decision. I suppose the problem for the government is pretty straightforward. The one thing that parents would wish you to guarantee is the one thing that you can't guarantee, that their children will not get COVID-19 as a result of them returning to school.
Well, we can guarantee that steps are being taken in order to ensure that children and those who work in schools are as safe as possible. Now, manifestly, the only way in which you can ensure that you don't get COVID-19 is by remaining at home throughout and having no social contact with anyone. We want to proceed in a balanced way in order to ensure the children, we've just been hearing about the impact on their mental health of isolation, children have the opportunity to be back in school, to benefit from learning, and as a result, to ensure that their future can be more secure.
But what chance is there, and many parents and teachers are asking this morning, what chance is there that children, particularly younger children, can socially distance, can follow the rules and recommendations around hygiene? I mean, my 4-year-old is a biological weapon at the best of times. Stick him into a school environment and goodness knows what will happen.
Well, other countries have succeeded in making sure that children can return to school safely. Other European countries like Denmark have done so. And of course the nature of what happens in the classroom has changed. And it is the case that instead of children working in a group around a table, they're sitting at desks separate from each other. And as a result, they are able to learn, they are able to benefit from being in school. We recognise that, of course, this requires careful working with teachers, but the leaders of some of the country's very, very best schools have said that they can ensure that children and teachers and other workers are safe, and they are proposing to return on the 1st of June with children in reception, Year 1 and Year 6 in primary schools receiving education.
We know that much of the independent sector has already ruled out returning to school on the 1st of June. When parents are sitting at home, parents of comprehensive school students, noticing that the parents of children who are going to Eton don't have to make that decision, how can you reassure them that the schools will be safe, that teachers will be protected, and that children will be able to go to school and come home free from COVID-19?
Well, my understanding is that many independent schools will be returning, that the trade body for independent schools that looks after children of primary age has said that its schools will be returning. And we've also had the leaders of some of the most important academy chains in this country saying that they are confident that children in the designated years can be taught in an appropriate way. We know that if children contract coronavirus, that the impact is significantly less. They're less likely to have symptoms, less likely to have serious symptoms than older citizens. But of course, we also want to make sure that teachers and other workers are safe. And we've been assured by those who, as I say, lead our very best schools, that a staged and careful return is an appropriate way of making sure that the children most in need get the education that they deserve. Because in particular, the longer children are out of school, the more the divide between those children who are in privileged circumstances and those children who are in less privileged circumstances goes.
So are the unions, the teachers that are complaining about returning to school, in their mind, without adequate protection for them, are the unions scaremongering?
No, I think it's important for us to continue a conversation with all the representatives of teachers' organisations. It's entirely understandable that unions and others would want to have reassurance about the health and safety of their members. That's the job of unions. The job of government is to work with unions, local authorities, and those who lead our schools in order to ensure that we can have a safe and orderly return. And that conversation, as I say, has been led over the last few weeks in a way which has given confidence to those who are in charge of our best schools that they can return. And I think that if we can make sure that we carry on those conversations, we can provide a safe environment for teachers and for children, and we can also make sure that children, particularly those from the least advantaged homes, have the benefit of a good education so that they can begin to make up on some of the progress that will inevitably have been lost during this period of lockdown.
What effect does the modelling suggest that reopening the schools will have on the R number?
Sorry, Neil, I missed that question. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll speak a little bit more loudly, just in case. What effect, if any, does the modelling suggest will happen to the R number after we reopen schools?
Well, we know that any progressive relaxation of the rules risks the R number going higher, but the really important thing is, provided the R number remains below 1 and the rate of infection is falling, then we're making progress in the fight against the disease. And we know that the R number is below 1, and we also know that the number of people being infected is falling day by day.
Just explain to viewers, not necessarily the ins and outs of how we come up with the R number itself, but its utility, because there appeared to have been a bit of a difference of opinion. At one point, we had the Prime Minister saying it is absolutely central to the way in which we exit the lockdown restrictions. Jenny Harris appearing to dilute that down. What is your view? I mean, does it all come down to the R number?
The R number is absolutely critical, but we also need to make sure that we're looking at the R number, which is the most important statistic, alongside other statistics. So if you've got R below 1 and infections are falling, then you're winning in the fight against the disease.
But why would lockdown conditions be eased in parts of the country with potentially dramatically different R numbers?
Well, the key thing is the R number below 1? That's the single most important determinant. And then, is it the case that infections are falling overall? If you look at countries like Germany and France, the R number is at different levels in different parts of those countries. But again, the French President and the German Chancellor have outlined the vital importance of beginning to ease the lockdown. And it is something that you need to do in a careful and a balanced way. As the Prime Minister has said, you take careful steps in order to ensure that you can keep R below 1. And if that is combined with infections falling, then you can progressively lift more and more of the restrictions.
But can we be certain that as of this moment, the R number is below 0, is below 1, I should say, because of that lag factor that there has in its construction, about 2 weeks, I think?
Yes, again, the R number is the product of scientific modelling, and scientists give a range in order to make sure that all of us recognise that while they're trying to be as absolutely precise as possible, it is impossible to state with absolute precision what the R number is. That's why we have that range. But the range that scientists do give us is clearly below 1. And it is also the case, as I say, that because infections are falling, we know that we're in territory where we're making progress against the disease.
One figure that I'm absolutely certain you'll be able to put a number on relates to contact tracing, of course, going to be incredibly important as we move into the next phase of dealing with COVID-19. How many people have we recruited to the contact tracing scheme as yet?
Just over 17,000.
17,000. So we are on track for next week then?
Yes. Here I have to praise the work of the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. In the past, people have seen Matt and the government set ambitious targets, and they said, oh, the target on testing, that won't be met. Matt met that target. It's now the case, as I say, that more than 17,000 people have been recruited for contact tracing, so we're on course to meet that target. Again, it's more evidence that we have in Matt an energetic and determined Health Secretary who is throwing everything into the fight against the virus and making sure that we mobilise a united national effort.
And when will they be trained, be in a position to actually be working on this scheme? When do we think we can have the contact tracing scheme up and running in the way in which you would like to see it to try and finally get this COVID-19 spread under control?
By the end of this month.
Grant. I wonder if we can turn to something that was said by the Health Secretary just a few days ago. And you'll understand that here at Sky News we've done a decent amount of reporting on the situation within social care, particularly within care homes. My colleague Nick Martin's done some fantastic work on that. The Health Secretary suggested that a protective ring had been thrown around our care homes. Can you justify that statement?
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. What we've seen is detailed instructions going to care homes about how we can make sure that we have appropriate infection control, additional support going to local authorities and to care homes in order to help them through this difficult period. And we've also seen fewer people being discharged from hospital into care homes this year than last year.
But in terms of throwing a protective ring around care homes, one might expect that in throwing that protective ring, you wouldn't then put COVID-19 positive patients into care homes.
Well, as I say, it is the case that we have had fewer people going from hospitals into care homes this year than last year. And it's also the case that for every patient who is released, an appropriate clinical judgment is made. And if patients are discharged into care homes, it's on the basis that that is appropriate and that is a more effective and a safer place for them to be than in hospital.
I'm sorry to labour the point, but
suffering from acute. Forgive me, hospitals are there for people who are suffering from acute conditions that need particular care, but hospitals are also places where there is a serious risk of infection as well, so doctors will weigh up that judgment and make a judgment about the most appropriate setting.
But again, I'm sorry to labour the point. It is difficult to reconcile the Health Secretary suggesting that a protective ring had been put around the care sector and COVID-19 positive patients being removed from hospitals and placed in care homes, which we hear anecdotally from a number of people working within the care sector. They were accepting those patients against the care home's wishes.
Well, I don't know of any example of patients being accepted against the wishes of the professionals, against the instructions of the professionals. More broadly, there is clear guidance on what to do if someone in a care home does have COVID-19, clear guidance on infection control and isolation. And that guidance, properly observed, helps to protect those who work in care homes as well as those who are in care homes.
The government guidance that was in place until the 13th of March, Mr Gove, says this: it remains very unlikely that people receiving care in a care home will become infected. No restrictions or special control measures are required in these settings while a member of staff or resident is waiting for a lab test for COVID-19. No need to close or send staff home at this point. I understand that the government's advice to care homes has changed. We understand that you have gotten rather better at getting the testing done within the care sector and in the NHS itself. But again, we put COVID-19 positive patients into communities in which some of the most vulnerable and susceptible people were already living. I just don't understand how we can reconcile that with the idea of putting a protective ring around the care sector.
Well, the first thing to say is, as you quite rightly acknowledge, that the guidance has changed at different points, and that guidance was issued at a time when we had a different phase of the infection. And the second thing to say is that people are only released from hospital if the clinical judgment is that it is better for them to be in a different setting. And the number of people who've been discharged from hospitals into care homes has been declining throughout this pandemic, and it's also 40% less than it was this time last year. And as I mentioned, it has been the case that we've laid out an action plan for care homes. We've spent £3.2 billion, given that money to local authorities in order to ensure better support for care homes. And we've also been providing personal protective equipment for people in care homes, as well as clear guidance on how to isolate patients effectively.
You're a very busy man, Mr Gove, but I wonder if we might turn your attention to Brexit just for a second. Reports this morning that talks with the European Union might be at the point of breaking down. Certainly we know that within the next 14, 15 days or so. Is that your understanding? Is it really that bad?
No, but there's a difference, of course, between the UK's position and the EU's position. The EU want us to accept their rules even though we're outside their club, and they want to have access to our fish even though we've left. We're making it clear to the EU that we can't do a deal on those terms, but I am confident that a deal is there to be done. It just requires a degree of flexibility on the EU side, which I'm sure that they will appreciate they need to show.
But what does all of this mean for the potential for checks between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom? It certainly seems that if we are to exit with, however you want to describe it, Australia-style deal, no deal, whatever else, if we come out on those terms, it does seem absolutely certain to some people that there will have to be those checks.
Well, the Northern Ireland Protocol, which we are determined to uphold, stresses that there should be unfettered access for goods from Northern Ireland coming into Great Britain, and it's only those goods that go into Northern Ireland which are at risk of going to the Republic of Ireland that will require a tariff.
But they will need to be checked, won't they?
Well, there are checks at the moment. There are epidemiological checks in order to ensure that we safeguard the single epidemiological zone for animal health that is the island of Ireland. But we want to ensure that we continue to have the greatest degree of flexibility and, as I say, unfettered access for goods coming from Northern Ireland into the UK.
And as for the Prime Minister, back into work after that period in hospital, how is he doing? I mean, how is his health? How, obviously, there's perhaps not as much face-to-face contact as pre-lockdown, but you'll certainly have an idea of how he's coping.
Yes, I mean, the Prime Minister's well. I mean, he's determined, focused, working hard, holding all of us in the Cabinet to account in order to deliver in the fight against COVID. And he's also determined to ensure that we support our public sector workers and throw our arms around them. And so the Prime Minister is in good form. And obviously, we face a very serious situation. He's determined to do everything that he can, and he's showing great leadership.
Well, hopefully we'll be bear hugging in the studio sometime soon. Michael Gove, really good to see you this morning. Thanks for being with us.